Hello everyone. So today I wanted to, I just locked my car. I'm aware as well that my audio skills are getting worse, but I wanted to talk about guilt and forgiving yourself and like being a bit nicer to yourself, because I recently have had not a great week or few weeks, and I've noticed a really big decline in my I would say my mental health, but it's not my mental health as a whole, specifically anxiety related things. And I don't know what it is. I think I said this in my last podcast, that this time of year I really struggle with self-deprecation, and I really look for things. I mean, I like to self-reflect anyway, and I like to see if there's things that I'm doing that aren't the nicest or the best for other people or for myself, that I could do differently to, help make my life better. And I've kind of noticed recently a big thing that I'm doing, and I've done this for basically as long as I can remember, but it's been specifically bad recently, is blaming myself for things and not giving myself the grace that I would give to other people to make a mistake. And there's been a few key examples of this recently where I've done something that, through no fault of my own, it's never been an intentional thing, has come across in a certain way or has led to certain outcomes, and I've really beat myself up for it. So one example that I could give is I missed an appointment, and this is kind of not a great example because this was one of the positives that came out from it, but I'll explain it in the typical sense, then I'll explain what I've learned to do differently, because I think this is something a lot of people struggle with, is that I missed this appointment, and usually I would be I can't believe I've wasted this person's time, I've ruined their day, I'm so unreliable. I just sort of spiraling and letting that ego brain take over and being oh, I'm the worst person ever. And today, for the first time, and I don't know what it is, I don't know whether it's because I'm now in therapy that I'm starting to heal from these, I don't even know what you would call it, guilt wound. But today, for the first time, I was able to, deal with it and say oh, I'm sorry, I missed the appointment. I'll compensate you for your time. Completely my fault. I didn't realise. Let me know when you're next available. And then, kind of just park that. Do you know what I mean? Put it to one side and realise that, accidents happen and that's okay. And before, I would have just let it consume me. And I think it was it seems like a really small win. But I think in the grand scheme of things, and in terms of my ability to let things go, this was a really positive thing for me. And I kind of just wanted to talk about some of the things that I've done over the past maybe week or so that have maybe led me to having this revelation, because I do feel and I know a lot of I know a lot of people work differently to me, but I also know there are a lot of people who think very similarly to me, and I can kind of almost draw a map of how I got to where I was to how I got to where I am now, if that makes sense. And I think the main thing was, at the start of this, I mean, as a person, I tend to be very forgiving, and I tend to be very if someone, say for example, I was on the other end of this thing, and I was the person who was expecting to meet someone today, and they didn't show up, I would be oh, well, I'm sure something came up and there's a reason, a perfectly valid reason, and I'm sure they'll get back to me when they need to. I would never hold that against someone, especially if I knew that things were already not, 100%, like, obviously, like I said at the start of this, like, I've been going through it a little bit recently, and this person is aware of that. And I'm pretty sure, like, you know, if I was on the other foot, if the shoe was on the other foot, I would be very courteous in understanding that there's, you know, a reason, and it's not that they are the worst person on the planet for doing that. And I've kind of, I wouldn't say I've always been this way, but I've definitely recently started to take other people's situations into consideration, and I think it's helped me to extend grace to the people that, you know, I wouldn't necessarily have before, and sort of helps to provide a reason for the way that they might be doing the things that they're doing. But I've always felt like I've never been able to do that same thing to myself. And even though I've been aware that there's reasons why, you know, that, like, there's reasons why I had to let someone down, I've never really been able to just, like, forgive myself and, like, drop it. Like, I really struggle with ruminating over things, like I said, and, like, I will go over something and I'll do it to death, and I will think about it, and I'll talk to every single person I know about it and what I've done wrong and whatever, and everyone will give me the same fucking answer. Everyone will say to me, it's not that deep, like, you're fine, you know, you've sent the message, that's all you can do. And I feel like I've got maybe a list of, like, 2 or 3 things that I've done this week that have helped me to almost, like, hit that wound, or, like, deal with that wound. And these are not going to be, like, mind-blowing revolutionary. Like, these are going to be very, very point-blank boring things that you've all heard 100 times before. And I don't know why, it's because I've heard them before as well, but it's taken so long for them to, like, click in my head. And people would always say these things to me, and I'd be like, yeah, but it's not that simple, is it? Like, it's not that easy. And I'm just going to explain how I came to those realisations myself, and almost how this negative situation was turned into a huge positive for me, in terms of, like, almost like, you know, when you kind of need a negative situation to happen to realise that there's been a mindset change. Because if you never had that negative situation, you wouldn't realise that there was the mindset change. Do you know what I mean? So a big thing for me, and I'm going to, like, give a bit of backstory and then explain it in, like, a way that isn't specific to me, but I kind of have to explain it in my brain first for it to make sense. So earlier on in the week, I had a little bit of a mental breakdown. I got, like, screamed at by a man in the street, and I had various other things going on. I'm in my final year of uni. It's a lot. And I was just feeling like this wasn't the safest place for me right now. I just wanted to go home. I wanted to... I was just looking for a way out. And then I kind of got convinced to stay, and then I decided, like, we were going to go to this house party, and then everyone was like, I don't want to go to the house party, I want to go to the pub. And I was like, I do not want to go to the pub. And I was like, if you guys are all going to go to the pub, I'm going to go home. And then in my head instantly started going to... My brain's just really mean to me sometimes, and I don't know why, but my head instantly started going to, they're all going to think you're throwing your toys out because you're not getting what you want, because you want to go to this house party, and because everyone else wants to do something else, you're throwing your toys out. And it wasn't like that at all. It was just like, I just didn't want to be around pub environments, and I didn't want to, you know, be at home while everyone's out in a house on my own. So it just made more sense to go home. And I was, like, battling with this. I was like, guys, please don't think I'm, like, doing this to throw my toys out. And they were like, we don't. But I didn't believe them, obviously, because, you know, my brain holds more weight over what anyone else has to say for some reason. And I was just, like, I was literally driving home in tears, because I was like, they all think I'm a brat. They all think I'm throwing my toys out. And they think that, you know, just because... And I was like... And then I got home, and I was talking to my mum about it. And I was like, I just don't want them to think that they, like, you know, the only reason I've come home is because I'm throwing my toys out. And I don't even know why it clicked. And it's going to sound so stupid when I explain it, but, like... Because I've heard this 100 times before, and I don't know why it was now that I clicked. And long story short, I've almost felt like no matter what I do recently, someone has something to say about it. And it's not like the same person every time, but regardless of what I do, there's someone that doesn't like it. And I felt like for the past, you know, however long, I've been trying to kind of appease everyone and And like, I kind of just came to the conclusion, and this is where I'm going to say the thing, and you're going to be like, yeah, that's fucking obvious, but that's not possible. And me coming home, someone is somewhere is going to think that I've done that to throw my toys out. And there is nothing I can do to make them think otherwise. But if I'd have stayed, someone would have probably had a problem with that. So, you know, I just need to start doing things that I want, that make me happy and are right for me. And I know a lot of people aren't spiritual that listen to this, but as soon as I went home, in the car on the way home, I stopped off and got food on the way home. Just being at home, I saw like 15 angel numbers on the way home. And I was like, okay, this is right. And like, if there's anything I'm going to trust over any person ever, it's spirituality. Like, I'm going to trust that way more than anyone else. So the fact that I sort of got all that confirmation I was like, okay, you know, this is right, like regardless of, you know, what anyone else has to say. And it was really weird because I felt like I had this like aha moment where I was like, it's such an obvious thing and it sounds so silly, but like this thing that I've been trying so hard to come to grasps with, that, you know, not everyone's going to be happy with what you're doing and you have to just please yourself. It's not new information. I've been trying so hard for so long to get it to click. And it, you know, I feel like it finally did click, where I was like, oh, okay, I can actually just do what I want. And that's fine. And I think I get so worried about taking up space and I used to get told that I was like obnoxiously loud a lot and like irritating. And specifically in school, a lot of people used to tell me that I was just like, you know, jarring. And there was like this, you know, there was a lot of things that went on in school that made me feel like my ability to take up space was not right or not allowed. And I think I react really hard, like I take it really hard when I do try and take up space and then I get shut down for it. And I know that sounds really like every other person ever, but that's why I kind of wanted to put this podcast out there, because I know that I'm not the only person that suffers with these things. And, you know, I hate talking about podcasts where I'm just explaining what's going on in my life recently, because I really worry that the people listening are like, can you shut up? Like, stop talking about yourself. But then I realised, like, you know, it's my own podcast, and I listen to other people's podcasts and they talk about their own stories, and it's again that feeling of guilt of like, people don't want to sit and listen to me talk about my own. Oh, there's two people hugging next to me. That's really sweet. People don't want to sit and listen to me just talk about myself for like 20 minutes. But then I've realised they can just turn it off. Like, I don't know. I just feel like I've had all of these realisations over the past like week where, you know, it's okay to take up space and it's okay to do what you want, and it's okay to like, because I'm the first person to preach. If someone else comes to me and is like, I'm really struggling with this, I'm like, set your boundaries, take up space, like, you know, be that bitch. Like, if people don't like it, fuck them. But I've never been able to take that advice myself. I've never been able to, and this will probably come as a surprise to anyone that like listens to this from my school, that specifically like secondary school, no later than that, because I took up all the space. I didn't give a fuck. I was so authentic in school, and no one liked that. And I don't know if that was just like a school thing, because I don't know what it was about that, but I felt like, and it was definitely like the ADHD, maybe somewhat autistic traits coming out, that I didn't realize that wasn't an enjoyable experience for other people. But I almost felt like, and I know that people relate to this because I've heard people say it so many times, but I almost feel like my authenticity was threatening to people, or people didn't like how comfortable I was in myself. And I listened to this podcast the other day. I'll link the girl who posted it if I can remember to. But she was talking about something called tall poppy syndrome. And it was about how when someone is confident enough or, you know, like grows sort of above other people in terms of like, for me, obviously it was like self-confidence. Like I was super self-confident in secondary school. It's like with a poppy, if one poppy grows taller than the rest, you know, you're going to want to cut it down so it matches the others and it's all uniform, because we don't like uniformity and we want everything to be the same. And I think that was like a really significant example of what happened to me, is that I faced all of this, like social exclusion of like, don't be like that, don't do that. And it's weird because it's only now that I'm almost 22, and I'm so I left school 6 years ago now, and it's taken me 6 years to realise that what I was doing in school, as much as no one liked it, that was the correct thing to do. That was me being who I genuinely am, and like trying to like rediscover that person. It's almost like inner child healing. If anyone's looked into like inner child healing, they'll understand how difficult it is, because as a child, basically all of us have a scarred inner child, because at some point we were taught that us being ourselves wasn't okay, and it wasn't like, sorry to get really, I'm not trying to be like super profound, and I'm aware that I'm not saying anything that no one else has said before, and I'm also repeating a lot of what I have already said before, but I feel like it's a really important thing to point out, and I think I would have benefited from hearing this last week, and I want someone else to have that opportunity to hear it and be like, oh my God, you're so right. Because I wish that I'd not had that feeling of, what you're doing is wrong or what you're doing is weird. It might have been weird, I don't know, but like, I was so like authentically myself at that age, from like, I don't know, when I was born to like 15 maybe. And I think it's almost like I'm relearning how to be that young child again, that is just okay with just doing things herself. And like, I feel like as well, because people weren't always so blatant about it. They weren't like, it's not like people were being like, you're weird, like fuck off. Like, people were just behind my back being like, what the fuck is she doing? And because I can't read the room. Like, I don't have very good social skills. I wasn't aware of that. And it was only at the end, when people would be like, oh, this person said this about you, and blah, 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 that it started to, like bring me down and like make me feel these things like guilt. Like, I struggle so well. I thought I did. Seems that I've now healed that part of myself. But I know you guys have probably heard me talk about this so many times on my podcast, where I'm like, oh, I don't want to sit and talk about myself for so long. It's my podcast. Like, I can talk about myself if I want to talk about myself. And like, I think this is specifically, I want to put this forward to the females. And, if you're a male and you're listening to this, you can listen, but I don't know if I'm not necessarily sending this out to your demographic. But I think women are so pushed back from taking up space, and we're not allowed to have an opinion, and we're not allowed to be loud. And I know I sound like every other woman ever by saying this, but like the empowerment I felt today when I realised that I didn't need to take on the guilt for making a simple mistake. And when and I know men are going to kick off about this, but I don't care, because it's important to hear, is like when men make a mistake, it's seen as like a growth point, or it's seen as like, whatever. When women make a mistake, it's like almost like a score chart, like a tally is put on them of the amount of mistakes, and people will use it as ammo to bring up, whenever they start to do something, someone will be like, well, do you remember when they did this? Or do you remember when they did that? Like, and this is the thing that I've struggled so heavily with. And like, I really feel like today I've like hit a milestone in, and I know that I'm probably saying this the exact same way that everyone's had it 100 times before, and I'm not expecting this to like revolutionize anyone's way of thinking, because no one ever could revolutionize it for me. It had to be, a thing that I came to terms with on my own. But, I just feel like I had such a win today in realizing that I didn't need to let my mistakes, I sound like such a fucking, like, I sound so like, annoying, but like, I don't need to let my mistakes define me. And it's so like freeing. Like, all my friends have been saying, like, one of my friends is going through a very similar situation as me right now, and she's been going through it for a while. And when I explained my situation, she was like, you are literally where I was this time last year, and what you need to do is like find a way to like not let yourself get affected by it, and realize that no matter what you do, or no matter, whatever, it's, you know, it's not going to be okay to someone. There's always going to be an issue. And, you know, like I was thinking the other day, I was thinking to myself, every time I see a TikTok video, it doesn't matter what it is, there's a hate comment. And it could be the most pure, like, happy video ever. And, you know, someone has something to say about everything. And I'm actually, like, jarred at how, like, base level, like, this is so unprofound. This is such, you know, a generalized comment to make. I don't know why I'm so amazed that I've now managed to come to terms with this. Like, I don't know how to explain it in anything other than, like, I've just not been able to make this realization for myself before. And like when she would say to me, you need to find a way, and it's so freeing, and I feel like I finally understand that. And I just hope by like opening this conversation on my podcast to anyone that is also struggling with a similar thing, that they'll be able to understand, because I don't know if this will help, but I know how much it would have helped me, if that makes sense. And I think I'm going to end the podcast there, but I just feel like, yes, like I want to like run around and like annoy people, like, and be okay with the fact that like me existing is annoying for some reason. Like, me existing pisses people off, and that's fine, because it's none of my business. And I always used to say this when I was a kid, and I don't know why I stopped saying it, but I actually remember why I stopped saying it. I'll leave this as my last anecdote, but when I was a kid, I remember I used to say, what people have to say about me is literally none of my business. And I remember once this girl that I was really good friends with, she was like, yeah, it is though, because it's about you. And like, honestly, I can't think of a time after that I said that. And I think I just let her words, like, you know, influence how I was feeling. And it's just crazy, because honestly, it is none of your business what people think about you. Like, it is not. And I don't know how I didn't realise this before, but I feel like I've had like this huge like revelation of something that's so simple and so obvious. And I just wish this for every specifically woman or female or girl or child. Like, I just wish this upon them. I wish this for the boys too, don't get me wrong, but I think girls have a harder time taking up space and feeling like they're allowed to communicate, and they're allowed to, like, one thing that I've struggled with this year is feeling like whenever I want to communicate something, I'm not allowed to have a thought or an opinion on something without there just being some kind of constant rebuttal. Like, it's never, like, you know, and I feel like, obviously, don't get me wrong, I've got those certain people that are in, you know, that will just hear me out and be like, I might not think the same, but, you know, you're allowed to feel that way. But there are so many people that I've encountered, specifically this year, where, like, anything that I've had to say where, you know, all I wanted out of the situation was for them to go, like, I hear you. I might not agree, but I hear you. I've had so many situations where they've just been like, but it's not like that though, is it? And it's like, well, it might not be to you, but it is to me. And I think that's like a really core part of my philosophy. Sorry, a man has just walked past and it's just thrown off my concentration. But that's a really cool part of my philosophy is that it might not be the same for you as it is for someone else, but that doesn't make their situation any less valid. But I've never been able to like flip that the other way and be like, it might not be the same for you as it is for me, but that doesn't make me any less valid. I feel like I sound so like millennial mum core right now, and that's okay. But I hope this made sense and I didn't just sound like a preacher. But I am really proud that I've come to this realization, and I hope maybe that you are going to also come to this realization. It would make me so happy if you do. And if you do, please message me and we can be happy about it together. But thank you guys so much for listening. I love you. See you soon.